Hi everyone, I'm Reba. I'm a member of This Way Up 2020 Development Forum, as Maddie said. So today I'm going to be chairing this chat with the aim to share a bit of insight into how the recruitment and also a bit of a retainment process can be made more accessible and widen the voices in our exhibition sector. So I'm joined by Sue Emmis, who is the Associate Artistic Director of Young Vic, Jo Verrent, who is Senior Producer at Unlimited, and Mikaela Smith, who is Programme Manager for the Showroom Sheffield, who all just dropped in very harmoniously in time. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So firstly, to let you know how this will go, I'll just do a little intro about the discussion, and then I'll have each of the lovely panelists take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves and their insights to themselves, their own experiences and work. So then we can move into a discussion. I'll welcome questions from each of you to each other. So please feel free to jump in and put a hand up to talk to each other. And then we want this to be interactive for everyone watching too. So please use the chat function and we'll do our best to get through any questions coming through. So as touched on day one in the great Diversifying British Film Culture chat and the Welcoming All Audiences Back conversation yesterday, there's a lack of people who are marginalised in society that's mirrored in the exhibition sector. Because how can we have the diverse audiences that we're talking about without having that within the workforce? Where there's a myriad of barriers, I hope that this discussion we can offer some insight into how the hiring process can be tweaked and improved to begin to build back a better and more open work culture. So I'm speaking today as someone who's been on both sides of the hiring coin last few months, and I think capacities which can limit things on both ends, and it is quite difficult. So we know that audiences, people watching now, are at different speeds with this, have different, more developed HR capacities. So decided to focus on some people and organisations who are doing well to come and speak with me, and hope that that will inspire or give you some ideas. And this can be quite a practical discussion. You can take away maybe one thing you can do that you can tweak or change to improve and support your hiring practice. So you've had more of an idea of how to take action within your organisation to improve your approach to network building and retainment as well. So yeah, firstly, I'd like Mikaela, if you wanted to share a bit about your journey into the industry and your work at Showroom with us.
Cool. Hello everyone. It's really weird to think there are people watching when I can only see people, but I'm going to try and keep a cool head. So my name is Mikaela, obviously you can see up here. I'm the Programme Manager at the Showroom Cinema. That is quite a recent role. I started in November, it's December now, and then I have been furloughed, so very strange kind of coming into it. But I came into the Showroom Cinema through a traineeship called FEDS, which is run by the SEO. It's a really great scheme. I'm a big advocate for that scheme. I think it succeeds where some of the other kind of traineeships and internships and placements and things can kind of leave gaps, which I can go into a bit later. Before I was with FEDS, I was working at a community organisation where we did various community projects through film. So we did a bit of work with Interfilm, we did some filmmaking workshops, and then I got BFI Neighbourhood cinema funding when that fund existed to run a kind of pop-up rural community cinema. And that's where I really first kind of got into cinema programming, film programming. I didn't grow up somewhere that had an independent cinema, so I was quite unfamiliar with that kind of whole world. And then through the film hubs, I think through that cinema, I was invited to an audience development day. And I remember Sophia Ramcharan from Broadway was talking about the Reggae Symposium that she did, some of the work that she'd been doing to reach communities in Nottingham at this really interesting cinema. And I was like, oh, this is a thing? Like I can do this and kind of get paid to do this at like a broader level. So that's what kind of started changing my view of what programming for a venue could be. And then I went to a screening days where Galen Gould was doing the keynote. And that kind of cemented it for me. I was like, look at these women doing this really interesting work. It was before she was at BFI. I think she was talking about TIFF. And I was really, really excited and kind of invigorated by both of those talks. And I remember I actually wrote about both in my FEDS application. And then I applied to FEDS and got onto FEDS, and have stayed at the showroom ever since. I was on a temporary contract for a little bit. And then a job came up for an audience engagement coordinator, which I applied for and got. And then 2 years later, I am now just fresh program manager. So I've been able to kind of progress and develop quite quickly in that role, which has been really good. And I think in part that's because hopefully I'm all right at my job, but also there have been a lot of people in the industry that have been very, very supportive, and FEDS gave me some kind of visibility and put me in a lot of room with a lot of people who are willing to kind of share knowledge and share opportunities, and have kind of had my back and have always been like, have you done this? Are you applying for this? You should be doing this. You should be going over here. And so I have been able to kind of continue on the development of FEDS and kind of keep developing as I've been going. So I have had quite a good experience coming into the industry. And so I can share a bit about that and the things that have kept me in.
Oh, thanks, Mikaela. Yeah,
Okay.
just checking you're done. Thank you. Yeah, definitely resonate with that. This is a thing moment that you can get into the industry that can be helpful, gaining a network. Now, Sue, I was hoping you could tell me a bit about your development of inclusive recruitment at Young Vic and your process with that.
Sure, thank you. So I'm the Associate Artistic Director of the Young Vic, which is a theatre based in London. And my responsibility is predominantly around artist development, specifically directors and theatre makers. But I've also led on our work in making our staff more representative. And about 5 years ago, we recognised that we'd made some headway in diversity in terms of the artists and the work we programme. So I'm not going to talk about artists or audiences, but we noted that we were still pretty monocultural in terms of our staff team. And we committed to change that by working towards making our permanent staff more representative in terms of race and class specifically. And we tried some things and we made some mistakes, but we did have success against the measures of success that we set ourselves. And it's lovely to be asked to come and talk here today. And every now and again, we are asked to talk about our progress. But I think it's really important to emphasize that we still have a really long way to go. And I'll talk later about how much harder we now need to take our work further. And obviously the world of Zoom has changed recruitment, but I won't talk about that. I'll just talk about the work that we've done in terms of recruitment when we're actually able to be in spaces with each other. So I was asked to give some examples of what we did to make the recruitment process more equitable and more accessible. And it was an approach that hopefully recognised how people's socioeconomic background, their race, their access to education, when they identify as being disabled, gives people more privilege. So generally, we allotted more time and resources. We always tend to recruit at speed, and that leads to lazy decisions. We mistake quality for familiar. Oh, they work somewhere that I know, and therefore you see that they go through to the next round. We put money aside to cover people so that they could properly give time to the process in reading applications and interviewing people. We didn't expect plug in and play. People who come ready formed with the experience are often the most privileged. We offered job shares to provide access to those who identify as disabled or have child and caring commitments. And we don't talk about fit or who's the best person for the job, because that means you're just recruiting yourself. In adverts, we say that we're willing to train. You always include salary at all levels. Not everybody works in the arts for the love of it. Most people, especially people who are not middle class, need to know that they can earn enough in order to support themselves and their families. Don't use words like passionate or energetic. Do you really need 50 energetic people turning up at your office on a morning? That doesn't requirement for the job. It actually just means that you're kind of wanting people to come with lots of energy, and that doesn't help people who maybe identify as being introvert. In terms of job descriptions, don't ask for a degree or equivalent. No one needs a degree to work in the arts for the most part. Challenge the criteria. What really is essential and what can you train? In terms of shortlisting, set yourself targets. Always interview people who fit the core criteria for a job, but ensure that the group is representative in terms of ethnicity, gender, geographical location, transferable skills, age, educational status. Interview all deaf and disabled candidates who meet the core criteria. Meet more people. Don't meet 6 people. Instead, meet 20 people for a shorter amount of time. And again, give more time and resources. Check if you are giving primacy to certain traits like worship of the written word, or if people have worked for free, recognize the internships that likely come with class privilege. In terms of interviews, look at the questions and the signifiers we use to assess a candidate's suitability for the job. What they want to do in 5 years' time doesn't indicate they can do the job now. That's a middle-class construct to have a life plan. Provide questions half an hour in advance. Demonstrate an ability to do a job is not how well you answer a question you've never seen before. It's about the thought to the question that you've asked. Pay for travel to interviews. Don't just offer one interview day and give notice of interviews that allow for flexibility in their present job. Not being able to get time off work should not penalise people. Second interview should always be part of the process. Lead on asking about access requirements through access riders. So it's the organisation's responsibility, not leaving it to people to have to decide whether to disclose or not. Don't create an experience in an interview where your aim is to test people. This isn't the Hunger Games. It should be a learning experience for them and for you. So those are just a few of examples. There was resistance pretty much at all levels in the organisation. Some people felt threatened, challenged, others were very sceptical. However, these examples are really just about making recruitment more efficient and equitable and fruitful for everybody, but they did give a diverse outcome. We had more representation in the people that applied, were interviewed and employed. We increased makeup of our staff to be 25% representative of Black and people of colour and 35% from working class backgrounds. So a success, but only partial. I don't think we've really begun to make the changes that will bring equity and inclusion to our organisation. And I've slightly struggled to write this next section, but it's the most important section because it's the bit I don't have the answer to. So I've got the beginnings of some questions that I'm asking myself and I'd like to share with you. How do we fully understand structural inequality in terms of race, gender, class and disability? We talk about embracing difference. It will bring new ideas, it will bring new ways of thinking, but that is centering whiteness and those who are non-disabled and those who are middle class. When we accept that our society and privileges some other people in terms of social, cultural and financial capital over others, we therefore have to see our employment and progression through that lens. We can employ more people when we ensure that we represent the demographics of our streets, but what is their experience when they join us? Do we know what a welcoming, affirming, safe space is to work in for those who are marginalised? And I say join us really deliberately, because fundamentally that's the problem. We have a door and it's like we're willing to open it to include others. We're not dismantling inequality, but asking those who are not presently represented to join us on our own terms. And how do we really create a habitat when people feel that they belong? How do we deeply change our processes and structures that are not Eurocentric and class-based? Those that are modelled on individualism, belief there's only one right way, perfectionism, progress is bigger, etc. Are we willing to really do the hard work that requires a lot of effort, where we as middle-class, white, university-educated people feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, challenged and defensive, and have the same level of stress that is felt daily by people of colour, those identified as being disabled, those that are working class, feel every day that they work in the arts, and that is if they're lucky enough to get past our recruitment processes. A lack of representation is not something to be fixed by lifting individuals from their underprivileged state. It's rather about challenging how privilege is constructed and how misrecognized as legitimacy. So, like I say, I don't really have a way to answer this because I'm asking myself these questions, and the answers are taking me and the organization to a vulnerable and hard place. So changing recruitment practices is only the start, not the end.
Thank you, Sue. That's a lot. Give me a lot to think about. I've written down a few questions, but first I'd like to pass on to Jo to tell us more about your work and approach at Unlimited. I feel like you'll maybe answer some of Sue's points.
Well, or maybe not. It's a massive list, all of which I agree with. So I'm going to try and pick up on some of the threads within that rather than just repeat the list. So my name's Jo Verrent. I'm senior producer at Unlimited. We're a commissions programme for disabled artists. We're funded by Arts Council England, Creative Scotland, Arts Council of Wales, British Council, a range of other funders. And we exist because of the structural inequalities within the arts funding system, and that disabled artists don't get a fair and equitable base from which to work. So we're here because of that inequality. We started just after the London 2012 Olympic Games. It was only ever supposed to be, Unlimited was only ever supposed to be a big hurrah as part of the Olympics. But it did something, not perfectly, but it did something about engaging the perspective and shifting the view around disabled people within the arts sector. So we've continued the programme from 2013 through to now, and we're actually about to become an independent organisation over the next 18 months. So on a bit of a trajectory ourselves. And when we started, we'd set 50% of our staff must be disabled people as a kind of absolute core benchmark. And over the time, that's actually crept up to over 80, 90% of our staff are disabled people now. And now we look back at 50% and think, well, that was a bit ridiculous. Why would a disability-led arts programme only have 50% of its staff being disabled people? But increasingly, just focusing on disability really wasn't enough. We had to look intersectionally, and it had to start with the artists. I think, as Sue said, it has to start with the core of what you do and what you deliver. Why would somebody come and work for you if they didn't see themselves as represented in the artists that you promoted? So we were very aware of the whiteness within the artists that we promoted. We were very aware of whiteness within staff, boards, selection panels, pretty much everywhere. So we took strategic action, very similar to the kinds of things that Sue was suggesting. And I think my core three out of those would absolutely be about time, in that it takes longer. So you have to really allow lengths of time within the selection processes. It would definitely be about see more people. How people come across on paper is very, very different to how people come across in the real world. And particularly if you are a disabled person or you're meeting multiple intersectional barriers, you are not going to be able to gather the work experience or the previous job history of somebody else who is white or privileged in other ways. So you really have to look beyond the CV to see people's potential and not just their track record. Seeing more people allows you to do that. And I suppose the third one that I'd really advocate for is diversifying the people involved in that selection process. We know that the more diverse our selection processes, be they for commissions or be they for panels, then the more diverse the results of those processes will be. Data is another one. It's one that Sue didn't touch on, so I'll spend a little bit of time on that. Comparing the data and the equal opportunities data of the people who apply to you with the people you shortlist will be really useful for you in spotting gaps. Who are you inadvertently discriminating against because of the way something's set up? Who's applying but not getting through to that next stage? And we've spent some time looking at intersectionality within data collection this year, and basically asked all our artists and trainees who applied to a recent role and our potential board members to complete equal opportunities questions around intersectionality. So we've asked about whether people are in precarious employment, whether people experience barriers due to their country of origin, whether people have refugee or migrant status, whether people have a different gender than was assigned at birth, a range of different things. And what we're trying to do is work out how many barriers people face. And the average number of intersectional barriers people face, irrespective of disability, in terms of the people applying to us, is around 3, 4, and 5. So it's quite a considerable overlap. And watching to see where this falls out in a recruitment process is absolutely fascinating, because the people who might traditionally get through are absolutely those who do not face multiple intersectional barriers. So we really have to start to look at that and shift that. Some stats from our recent trainee appointment. We have 2 trainees at any one time for exactly the same reason that Mikaela was talking about earlier. It's about bringing people into the industry. It's a starter position, but it's not age bound. Obviously, 100% were disabled. It's a position for disabled people. But we also, this time around, had 65% of applicants were from one of our 4 white categories, which meant the other is our highest proportion of non-white applicants for a role. 31% were transgender, which was a real surprise to us. But we've supported a considerable number of transgender artists recently. And I really think that the message gets out and spreads within communities that you can create a safe space. You can create a working culture that is respectful, and then that welcomes people in. Less than half our applicants were straight, which I always find absolutely hysterical. The dominance of the perceived dominance around sexuality is something that within the arts we always laugh about and say, oh yes, of course, there's always a high representation. But we haven't found that to be the case in previous years. It seems to be fine if you're at a relatively senior role, but that doesn't stop institutional homophobia being present in many other roles throughout the industry. But also we realised from our forms that we have to change our wording, because we always have a I do not wish to declare, but we also have I want to describe myself in other terms. And our terms didn't include the word queer. And almost everybody who didn't identify as straight ticked the box, actually, the term I use is queer. So we have to change the terms that we use. And we're using terms that come from our funder. So we actually have to have that conversation with our funder about, we need to change these terms, they're outdated. It also links to the BAME over conversation. We can't keep using terms that people don't find relevant. We have to shift and move. And class as well, 55% of the applicants self-identified as being working class. We know the definitions around class are complex. We know that we don't have a perfect tick box around that. And we know that organisations like Jerwood are doing some really interesting work about how we can legitimise data in that area. But actually asking people, is that how you define, I think is a reasonable method amongst many others to be able to do that. So we absolutely have to keep shifting and changing. We have to see it as an iterative process rather than a fixed one. But key for me is that we have to look at it intersectionally. We cannot just look at one barrier at a time without recognising the additional issues that come with for people who face multiple overlapping barriers. It's become a real passion for us to look at. And unlike Sue, we're a very small team. We're very flexible. We haven't hit the barrier of people not wanting to shift and change. We've been met with curiosity, encouragement, excitement even, which is a brilliant place to really see how far you can push around those things. And the key thing for me is whenever anybody joins any staff team, how do you do your best work? What can we do to change what we do already to enable you to do your best work? That's what we want. We want everybody to do their best, not to fit into a system that doesn't suit them. So every time anybody joins us, everything comes up for renegotiation, the times of meetings, the length of meetings, the way in which we have meetings. All of that has to be renegotiated each time anybody joins. And it's a fascinating journey, and we really enjoy that process of seeing where it will lead us next. But I'll stop now because I'm slightly over my time.
Oh, no. No, it's great. Thank you. I think that definitely resonates, asking people how you change to help them do their best work and not fit into the system. So many opportunities that are made for perhaps people who are underrepresented are still asking you to fit within their requirements and needs and boxes. So there was conversation with funders. You seem to have covered a lot of the UK with your funding is really key. And again, I'm just wondering if that links a lot to what you're saying about centering whiteness within the process and being like, oh, these new people coming in make things so much more interesting and diversify our program. So I was wondering if you could expand on that a bit and how you changed the monoculture in your staff to make, again, to boil it down to the language and how you change how you speak about these things in your approach, if that makes sense.
It doesn't. I guess in some ways we're not quite there yet, because it's about recognizing where you are privileging the things that you feel comfortable with, because the world is established more so for certain people, that just the language you use and the aspects of expectation of, do you remember when you went to university? And actually there's a lot of people that don't go to university, and you're endlessly privileging that experience. Or you're talking about, where you went on holiday. Oh, everybody's gone skiing, haven't they? And it's just, you don't necessarily know that you're doing these things, and they become increasingly microaggressions within people working within your organization, because you look around and you can see that everybody's got the same accent, or everybody went to a similar kind of school, or everybody is from the south of England, and it just becomes that sense of not enabling people to be themselves, because it's such an oppressive sense of this is like the default position. And if you don't fit within that, then it, especially, from my experience, it just becomes reducing of you being your best self, which is exactly as Jo kind of has indicated. Does that sort of answer your question?
It does. I mean, I'd call skiing a macroaggression, but I'll let Jo speak.
What is
I say we always with our trainees, we always do trainee videos at the end of the, where they talk about as a way of recruiting new trainees. And that thing about saying, I was able to bring my full self to this, and I've never been able to do that before. I didn't have to hide the needs that I had as a disabled person. Every time somebody says that, and it comes up very often within the trainees' journeys, every time it hurts that people have had to hide that before. We should not be hiding ourselves. It's 2020. It's like it's not the 16th century. We should be able to bring, without any prejudice, the whole of ourselves, as much as we wish to, into our work environment. It's where we live. It's where we spend most of our time. I just find it so painful when I hear people expressing that feeling that they've had to hide elements of themselves.
Yeah. I'd also just like to add to that. I've always felt quite very welcomed in my office space, and very happy and quite comfortable. But I also recognise that come from like a rural town in England, and there was like 4 brown people in my year at school. So I've gotten very used to being in kind of majority white spaces. But in the last couple of years, I have felt kind of our organization kind of changing. And there are 3 women of color in my office now. And we also have someone who's deaf in my office. It's a small office. It includes Mum Hub North and just kind of programming and marketing. But the conversations that we have and the way that we approach meetings and the feel of the office environment is very different. And I would say that, like, I feel that I have become much more confident in my last couple of years, having that kind of support system that is just different in my kind of immediate office space. It does change things, I think.
Yeah. And yeah, that is very true, Mikaela. And I wanted to ask you about saying that you were able to, I guess, through Feds and doing your work with rural cinemas before, how you're able to build that network and having people who were willing to share and guide and direct you, how that within the institutions you've worked in, organizations, but also just people in the sector, maybe outside, or I've heard about people having sponsors within where they work, and if you've experienced anything like that.
Not so much. I think one of the things I really think is good about Feds, I've always had lots of support from kind of my managers and also kind of people who've like almost effectively mentored me. But the thing that's really special about Feds is that there's 5 of you coming in at the same time. So even if the organization that you're going into isn't as diverse as you might want it to be, which sometimes is the case, there's a network of people who are you meeting with every month, who have probably got similar experiences or that are kind of going into organizations that are quite similar. And so as well as there being kind of people who are willing to support you from above, there's this kind of peer-to-peer support that I really benefited from. And I'm still in contact, with lots. I mean, one of the people in my office, Rosh, came through Feds, but I talk to Rico a lot. And I think it's very beneficial to have kind of people at your level who you feel that you can talk to about, the industry and your experiences.
Definitely. And Jo and Sue as well, I wanted to ask about, I know, Jo, you said about having the trainee videos at the end of each trainee's time with you at Unlimited. And again, Sue, how you make it visible that there is that progression or diversity already in your workplace, and how that can maybe have an influence on the people you attract to the roles and the process of hiring.
I've just put a link in the chat to a video, a kind of top tips thing about recruitment we did a year or so back, but also the trainee video, which I really hope people get to watch, because it's really useful to see that and to use those things as a marketing tool or a way of attracting more people in to the organization. But a bit like Sue said earlier, I absolutely don't want to paint a picture that we're perfect. The trainees that we recruit are very varied and diverse. If you look at the rest of the makeup of Unlimited, it really isn't yet. And we're caught slightly in the same trap as many organizations when turnover is slow of staff. How do you diversify a set team? But we will have, as we transition into an independent organization, that's an absolute priority for us to really look at diversifying the range of things, including at the very top. So in time, we don't think it's suitable for there to be a single director, a single head of an organization, because whatever I bring with me, be that a mother, disability, a range of things, there's a whole host of other things I don't bring with me. And so we really want to look at shifting it throughout the whole of the organization. But I just wanted to say we're absolutely not there yet. It is a journey we are on, the sense you mentioned.
Yeah, and that links, Sue, as well. Somebody did ask in the chat, what sort of mistakes did you make and how are you still changing that? Not being too
many
exposing anyone.
There's just one thing in terms of the other question that you posed, Reba, which was like we haven't done videos. No, it's cool. We haven't done videos, but one thing we've done, and I think it is sometimes about the primacy of writing, and this kind of myth that somehow everybody who should be an artist or work in the arts needs to be sort of really good at expressing themselves in writing. Some jobs require that, some don't. So in some of what we've done, where we can, we've taken away the whole need to write anything. So it's more about coming to an open day, coming in, having people kind of represented from all across the organisation, people who already do the job, so that you can come in and actually find out more about it. And especially with front of house, front of house is all about connection with people and how you problem solve in the moment. So if you make that a much more enjoyable sort of interactive experience, it appeals to a whole different range of people. And another thing that actually York Theatre Royal found, which was really interesting in terms of their, I think, catering team, they just took away the name of the theatre because that was putting people off. So actually, if you just knew you were going to go and work, in the cafe and you liked hospitality and you liked meeting people, they took away, we always think, I'm sure more people will want to apply because you're a theatre. How marvellous is that? But actually, it's a bigger barrier because people just think you're funny, posh, poncy people. Why would I want to go and do that? So I think we need to deconstruct the idea that somehow we are naturally appealing to people, and actually we are really off-putting. And it's not people that are hard to reach. It's actually that we are hard to reach. And that's part of the journey that we need to kind of like take down those barriers of people coming to us.
And I absolutely second the getting rid of the primacy of the written word. We allow people to apply in video now. And that was initially aimed at deaf people who might want to apply in sign language. And then we would take on the labour of the translation of that for the rest of the selection panel. But actually, the majority of people who applied by video this time round weren't because they were deaf. It was because that was their preferred way of applying. Which might be due to dyslexia or a range of other things, or might be because actually that is where they are most confident. So if you hear noise now, it's because somebody's washing my windows. In this particular moment. Shit. But I'm just going to go and hide in the shower, which is what I did last time. It happened. Yeah. Videos.
This is great.
Yeah, I've applied.
Carry on, Reba. Sorry.
No, sorry. I just wanted to say, I definitely agree with the video thing. I'm not always the most comfortable on video, but it's making sure that, again, with the front of house, that the interview process matches the job. I've seen very short roles, part-time roles, where you've got to fill out 3 pages of questions, and it's like, I don't have this time to do this. I'm unemployed. I'm working part-time. I'm trying to find an in, and it, if it was a Google form with 3 questions that I could spend a bit of time on, and no, that's not the be-all and end-all of my application. That's a lot friendlier in a way, and yeah, it's your first introduction to the company you're working with as well, which is important. I think I should bring in, if anyone wants to ask each other a question, I'm just going to read through the audience ones while I have a moment. So somebody else would like to know.
You asked me. Sorry.
Go ahead.
You just asked a question. I was trying to helpful cover. You asked about mistakes, and I guess
yes.
Some of the mistakes are around language, are around intent of the hire. So sometimes people can feel, depending on how the recruitment is followed, that they're brought in to tick a box, or somehow that they're there because of their race, or they're there because of their class. And I think that can be really debilitating, and you need to really think about how you talk about it organizationally, in terms of that person is there because they are brilliant at their job, but the processes it has given equality and equity to enable them to shine. So it's not that they're there because you know, it's great, isn't it? We're kind of diversifying, but it's really being careful about that and making people feel recognized, seen, respected in the language that's used around recruitment. And I know we did not manage that, and some people, I think we have to recognize, because, you know, HR is human resource, it's about people, and the harm we can cause to people is really great. And if you are sort of someone coming into an organization that is predominantly white or predominantly middle class or predominantly heterosexual or predominantly non-disabled, you have to recognize the sheer stress that person is under to step into those spaces that don't feel familiar or supportive. And we didn't do that. I didn't recognize that.
And I would say, even within that, there are many different ways to be any of those different things. So actually, somebody with one form of disability or who treats their disability in one particular way might still feel that pressure in a disability-related organisation. For example, we often have a lot of people kind of go, you know, I don't often talk about my disability, or it's not something that I consider part of my identity. And actually, because many of us do, that can also put a strain on people, unless you're really clear and explicit and say, how you are is welcome here. It is your choice how much you wish to engage in these conversations. It's your choice how much you share or don't share various facets about your access requirements. So I think that even within some places, we have to still be nuanced, because not everybody's protected characteristic manifests in exactly the same way as somebody else's.
Definitely. And I've found having like an invisible disability going into those spaces and feeling like, oh, is this the right place for me? And again, going to these interviews with a panel of, again, like older white people, and having to be like, oh, am I getting this job because I fit all these criteria or because I fit the actual job description criteria, is very stressful when you're going into a big building you've never been in before. So again, yeah, personal experience. Just a question from the audience is how do you, when you're in a rural area where infrastructure and diversity are a bit non-existent, if anyone had any ideas of how to start?
I think the current pandemic has shown us very clearly that you can do anything from anywhere, obviously with caveats in place. But where you are actually based doesn't automatically mean that you can't be engaged in certain activities. And I think we have to remember this when we go back to whatever the new normal is. But I think the same applies in terms of you are less likely to have the work experience, you're less likely to have particular contacts, you're less likely maybe to use the terminology that a different arts organisation might be more used to if you've come from a more rural environment where you haven't had the experience of those connections. So you haven't managed to go to, a drama club, or you haven't been able to do those things. And we have to take on the labour of that. We have to take on the fact that those barriers and that lack of experience is not that individual's fault. It is the system's fault that they haven't been able to have those experiences. So the more we just look at the CV in terms of, oh, where have they worked? What have they done? It doesn't work. We have to look more broadly at that in terms of potential.
And I think if you're...
sorry, can I just say before, someone in the chat has asked if we could just remember to speak a little slower for people with using the live captions. Sorry, I'm guilty of that. Sue?
Sorry, I'm really guilty big time of that, so apologies. I think if the question was sort of as a rural organisation, how do we kind of make our staff more representative? I think it does go back to what Jo was saying as well, which is look around and do the data and see who isn't within your organisation. And that might not highlight for you race, it might highlight class, or it might highlight those who identify as being disabled. I think there will always within your area, whether rural or otherwise, or really metropolitan, there will be people that are missed out that are definitely represented within your communities, and that's your responsibility to find out who they are, because we can't all work in the same way. In London, there is absolutely no excuse to be representative in terms of the demographic of race that kind of exists within that big capital city.
Oh, I've lost Sue.
Oh, Wi-Fi. She was on such a good role. Did anyone else want to maybe fill in?
Correct. Yeah, we can't ignore the data, and I think it's really important that we start by making that data monitoring happen internally, and then map it to our local areas or the areas that we represent or that we cover, and then track it right the way through any recruitment process. It's a really simple thing to do as well, and it really opens up and allows you to see where the gaps might be, which is really, really useful.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. We I think certainly look at who is getting through to interview and things like that, and track it, and track the kind of diversity of our staff in all different forms. And I think quite recently, one of the things we've started doing as well is looking at, we have like an inclusion steering group that's recently started. And one of the things that we did was getting feedback from staff about how the kind of environment is for them. So they can kind of feedback anonymously about their experiences at work. And that, I think, has been quite eye-opening for a lot of people. And I think I see a lot, just going back to some of your points earlier, I see a lot of applications that are like, we particularly welcome applicants from X group that are underrepresented in our organization. And I always think that's kind of like a blessing and a curse, because I'm like, I know there's going to be nobody there when looking at it. And I think if you're putting that on, you have to consider whether you're actually a welcoming environment. Like, do you know that you're a welcoming environment? It's okay to be like, oh, we want more of these people. We want to change, the makeup of our organization, but understanding why you want that and whether those people, you're going to be able to retain those people long term, I think is really important.
Yeah.
How have you both found retainment as well? I know this is about hiring, but if we move to the kind of progression part.
For us,
I mean, for yourself and others.
We've never had anybody leave because we're a program at the moment. So we've had people move through in different organisations. For us, the test will happen when we become an independent organisation. So we'll find out there. The traineeships are for 12 months. So we can't retrain trainees, which is heartbreaking, because by the time all of them leave, we want to retain them. But it's actually written into the traineeship that we can't then employ them, because the whole point is about creating opportunities for people within the cultural sector. If we held on to them all, it wouldn't be fair or right. But all of them have gone on to work and gain jobs within the cultural sector, which is fantastic, be it within arts funders or arts organisations or their own individual arts practice. So yeah, and we're really tiny. So again, retention isn't the easiest thing for us to talk about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for us, it varies kind of department to department, but I wanted to go back to Delphine's point from kind of day one on this way up about feds and about the retention of feds. There are some really interesting people who have come through the scheme, who are kind of grinding away in the background and doing really interesting things. And I think that it's still, Sue is back. I'll stop in a minute. Who I'm sure are going to have like really amazing jobs, but that process is a really slow process, and we need the industry to be better in order to retain all of those people for an extended amount of time. Otherwise, they've got loads of potential and they're just gonna go. And so I think where those traineeships are really important, Feds is designed to kind of input people at the bottom, skill them up, give them a network, and then they'll grow and grow. But unless we're going to have this conversation every year for the next like 5, 10, 15 years, we also need people coming in top down to balance out the industry, and people who can make decisions and like are given budgets.
Yeah. And did I ask the question, how do you change things at the top? Question to the panel. Did I say that one?
I think people at the top have to give up power. I think it's the only way that that's ever going to happen, is that you have to really, if you are running an organization or a program or whatever, you have to really investigate whether you're the right person to be there, or for how long you might be the right person to be there, and at what point you need to start sharing that power. So all of those things about legacy and about all of those things aren't just words on a piece of paper. They are actual human beings who have to make decisions for themselves about how long have I been here and what am I stopping? Not just what am I creating, but what am I stopping by being here? And they're really tough conversations. And I think they're conversations that boards should be having with people at the top of organisations or in any senior management role.
Definitely. I know there's an organisation in Bristol called Rising Arts Agency that having a change at the top is built into their project plan. Sorry if I got that wrong. That's what someone I know who was involved with them has said, which I thought was great, because how many, I don't know any other places that's built into. Another question was any advice on making spaces more welcoming and making sure that they're safe?
I think that can be a really hard one, because the people trying to make the space safe are not the people with the knowledge, skills and experience about what makes a space safe. So quite often they can design something which they think might be safe, but actually doesn't suit the needs of the individuals. So my advice would be that you have to go from the ground up. You actually have to ask people who might be feeling unsafe what would make it safer for them. Because it's not one size fits all. It's not one standard thing. I love a rest space because I have fatigue. Obviously, I have a duvet in my shower. But it's kind of like wherever you are, I need to lie down at varying points. So at Arts Admin, for example, they've got a beautiful rest space, which is great. So I can lie down. If I'm there, I can lie down and have a kip at any particular time. That's great for me. But that's a very individual thing. Many other people might like that, but there's other things that other individuals need. So I don't think it's about finding a single solution. I think it's about holding a constant open question, a constant open line of inquiry about how you can keep bettering spaces in terms of safety from the people who really have that knowledge.
Thank you. If anyone else wants to say on that, there was one last question I wanted to get in, because I'm aware we're getting close to the end. As Sue's back, somebody did ask, how do you decide how much to pay people as they perceive it, that maybe pay in the arts doesn't meet the criteria you mentioned to make jobs affordable for a wider section of people?
Sorry, Reba, I'm not quite sure what the question is.
So it's, how do you decide how much to pay people to make jobs maybe more affordable?
Well, there's also a lot of conversation around, isn't there, the difference between those that are paid at the top and those that are paid at the bottom, and whether or not there should be less incremental difference between those things. And it's complex because, again, if you are going to run a national theatre and all of the pressure and the kind of difficulty that entails, you probably do want to be paid more than someone for whom that pressure and that responsibility and that decision making isn't the same for them on a daily basis. But can that divide be brought together? And I think it is a fundamental complexity of working in the creative industries that we need to unpick somehow, and I don't have the answer, which is there are too many people going for two jobs, and when you do get the job, they're really badly paid. So is it that, we need to make some really hard decisions, like we do less work, but we pay people better? And therefore that is kind of like you're giving fewer opportunities in some ways, but you're actually ensuring that those people that do have those opportunities can work. But But I think it's also, how universal credit impacts on people, I think, in terms of how we pay freelancers really needs to be unpicked. And Kat Shoebridge and Steph O'Driscoll, who are two directors, are doing some really vital work as part of their organisation called Class and Coronavirus, that is trying to help finance departments doing this and understand some of those real day-by-day challenges. And I know for deaf and disabled people, it's really similar, is that, again, we've got finance systems that only work for a certain section of society. And mostly those people, they're never really worried what's in their pay packet because they've got some degree of kind of financial support around them, whatever that might be. And so I think it's kind of, again, it's that structural underpinning that we need to kind of unpick. So it is about salaries, but it's also, most of certainly the theatre industry is made up predominantly of freelancers, and how those freelancers engage really needs to be looked at.
I just want to echo the sheer volume of, so we had a call out recently for a funding round. We had 70% increase on people applying, which means we announced our shortlist today. And yesterday we had to send 392 rejection emails. It's shit. It's totally. There is not enough money in the sector to meet the needs of disabled artists or of artists generally. And it is painful all round having to do that, even when it's just an expression of interest, even when you've made it as accessible as possible, even when you've made it as light touch so people aren't investing huge time and energy. You're playing with people's hopes and you're playing with people's futures, and it's hideous. It's just hideous. We haven't come up with a better system, but the sheer numbers involved and the sheer numbers of people who are being phenomenally disadvantaged at the moment due to COVID and the
unemployment rates.
It's just painful, heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Sorry to end on a downer.
No, that's okay, Joan. I mean, we are having this discussion whilst it is like massive unemployment in the UK, and we need to be very aware of that, and that people are very stretched and furloughed at the moment. But we need to speak about how it's going and what we can do to maybe alter that and the different ways in, which I hope this chat has done for all the people we can't see who are watching. We're getting very close to the end now, so I'd like to thank you all for coming and showing the time and insights, which is definitely helped me in the small hiring I'm doing at the moment. Thank you. If any of you'd like to say anything or any other points you'd like to add before we say bye.
Just thanks for the panel. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to share practice.
I thank you all for your knowledge. I want to watch this back while I'm not sitting on it thinking about things to say, because I think there's some things that have been said for everyone. So thank you, and thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Yes, this will be available.
And I think it's just to
No, I was just saying you can watch it back, which probably didn't need to. Yes, Sue?
I was just saying, just make mistakes, because it's never going to be perfect, and we're encouraged only to ever do things when they're perfect. And actually, you just got to step into it, and you will make mistakes, and you will feel vulnerable, and you will kind of not necessarily enjoy it, but it's something that we just all have got to do, and we all have a responsibility, I think, and we've got to take that responsibility and do something about it. And it's a bit like Jo said, we've all got power in some way, and we've just got to use our power in the best way that we can.
Definitely. I think I've definitely had to sit a lot with discomfort and things this year, and in a lot of jobs and processes, and change your attitude to being a bit uncomfortable. Don't know if that's the note I wanted to end on, but it is a hard one.
Be uncomfortable.
Be uncomfortable. Thanks, everyone.
Which I physically
Thank you very much, all of you, for your time.
It's just in a shower.
Oh, I'm inside a shower.
I appreciate the dedication to the panel. Right. I didn't get any notes on how to finish this from the person, so I guess we'll close the browser and say thanks.
Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
Oh,
That's Maddie.
Thanks, Reba, Mikaela, and Jo. Sorry to leave you in limbo there for a little while.
Okay.
Some really good final point from Sue about making mistakes, and along the way, we've already taken on some of the things that Sue's recommended to Watershed for our recruitment processes, and it's making a difference. So I really urge everyone out there to give it a go. And although we've got a long way to go, I think there were plenty of really good insights in this panel for us to get started on that journey. And representation matters. So let's do that.